Coming up on Arirang News, President Moon Jae-in says the South Korean government by the end of the year will have a national strategy for artificial intelligence. That'll involve government investment in related technology like 5G. South Korea proposes holding talks with the North about a new way forward for South Korean tours to the North's Mount Geumgang resort. Seoul says it's an important symbol of inter-Korean cooperation. And the top officials of China's Communist Party meet in Beijing in a secretive meeting on party policy and presumably how to navigate challenges like the trade war with America and the Hong Kong protests. It's 4:00 p.m. here in Seoul. Thanks for tuning in to Arirang News. I'm Devin Whiting. South Korea has suggested holding working-level talks with North Korea about resuming tours for South Koreans to the North's Mount Geumgang resort. Seoul's Unification Ministry says it sent a notice to Pyongyang this morning through the Joint Liaison Office. It proposed meeting at the Mount Geumgang resort at a time convenient for the North. This is apparently in response to a message from the North last Friday telling the South to send a team to the resort and tear down its facilities there. Seoul says, however, that because the area holds a lot of significance as a symbol of inter-Korean cooperation, the matter requires both sides to meet face-to-face. Officials say they will be discussing a, quote, new way forward for the tours, and that if the talks take place, government officials will be accompanied by those from Hyundai Asan, the South Korean firm that's been the main operator of the tour business. A statue has been installed near Washington, D.C. in remembrance of the hundreds of thousands of women who were forced into sexual slavery by the Japanese military before and during the Second World War. Oh Soo-young reports.
A statue representing the Korean victims of sexual slavery under the Japanese Imperial Army has been unveiled near Washington, D.C. Kil Won-ok, a 93-year-old surviving victim, was forced into serving sex at a Japanese military brothel 80 years ago. She placed a wreath of flowers on the statue.
The pain of my past has been shared bearing this girl, the Statue of Peace, which sits at this place.
The launch comes after 3 years of delay due to strong opposition from Japan, which has made undisguised attempts to remove statues representing comfort women from various locations around the world. At a ceremony in Annandale, Virginia, just a short drive away from the US Capitol, various state officials and members of the Korean expat community celebrated the launch. An exhibition has also been set up to raise awareness of the wartime atrocity that affected an estimated 200,000 women in Asia.
It provides educational content on human rights and dignity, and the movement against war and injustice to future generations.
It is the 14th Statue of Peace installed in the United States. Former comfort women and activists for their cause have for decades been calling on Japan to issue a formal heartfelt apology for their wartime sexual enslavement of women. But time is running out. Only 20 Korean victims remain alive, as 220 of those registered with the government have already passed away. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
The most powerful people in China's ruling Communist Party are meeting this week behind closed doors in a highly anticipated session on policy. In the face of challenges like the trade war with the U.S. and the protests in Hong Kong, it's likely they'll be looking for ways to ensure the party's grip on power. Oh Jung-hee reports.
With various challenges at home and abroad, sluggish economic growth, an ongoing trade war with the U.S., and anti-government protests in Hong Kong, leaders of China's ruling Communist Party are gathering this week to discuss the way forward. Over 300 members of the party's Central Committee will be gathering behind closed doors to discuss strengthening China's socialist system and governance from Monday to Thursday. It's the first meeting in 20 months, the longest interval between two plenary sessions in recent decades. The meeting comes at a critical time when China faces several crises. In its handling the Hong Kong demonstrations, China has faced criticisms over its violence and for trampling the rights and liberties of the people of Hong Kong. At the same time, Beijing's economy is growing at its slowest pace in nearly 3 decades, partially affected by a protracted trade war with Washington. Experts say it's key for Beijing to use the occasion to add political legitimacy to the party's rule. Though these issues aren't likely to be included in the final communiqué, they're highly likely to be touched upon. China's ruling party is also expected to seek ways to strengthen its leadership at various levels of society, possibly rolling out reform plans. At the third plenary sessions held in spring last year, the party laid out comprehensive institutional reforms, merging a number of state institutions and bringing them under the party's direct control. The results of the meeting won't be known until China's official Xinhua News Agency releases the details on Thursday. Oh Jung-hee, Arirang News.
U.S. President Donald Trump has announced that the leader of the Islamic State group, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, has been killed. According to Trump, in a nationally televised address, a raid by U.S. Special Forces saw al-Baghdadi flee into a tunnel and blow himself up along with 3 of his own children. Lee Seung-jae reports.
Speaking at the White House on Sunday in a televised address to the nation, U.S. President Donald Trump announced that a U.S.-led attack in Syria prompted to the world's most wanted man, Islamic State leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, to detonate his suicide vest after fleeing into a tunnel, ultimately killing himself.
Last night, the United States brought the world's #1 terrorist leader to justice. Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi is dead. He was the founder and leader of ISIS, the most ruthless and violent terror organization anywhere in the world. The United States has been searching for Baghdadi for many years. He died after running into a dead-end tunnel, whimpering and crying and screaming all the way.
President Trump added that U.S. Special Forces suffered no losses during the raid, and he thanked Russia, Turkey, Syria, and Iraq for their support. Al-Baghdadi has long been regarded as the world's most wanted man, with a $25 million bounty on his head, and he has been pursued by the U.S. and its allies since the rise of the terrorist group some 5 years ago. At its peak, the Islamic State, under his leadership, controlled 88,000 square kilometers of territory, stretching from western Syria to eastern Iraq. The following day, al-Baghdadi's right-hand man and ISIS spokesman, Abu al-Hassan al-Muhajir, was also killed in a joint raid between Kurdish-led and U.S. forces in northern Syria. Kurdish officials said the raid was a continuation of the previous operation that took out al-Baghdadi. While the deaths of the top 2 ISIS leaders deals a significant blow to the terrorist group, security experts believe the extremist organization remains a global threat. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
South Korean President Moon Jae-in will be attending a series of global events next month. These start in Thailand in the first week of November, with summit meetings related to the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. The presidential office said today that President Moon will be leaving for Thailand for 3 days, starting this coming Sunday.
President Moon, through the ASEAN Summit, will explain the administration's major issues, including the situation on the Korean Peninsula. He will call for ASEAN member nations' continued support for the successful hosting of the Korea-ASEAN Special Summit and the Korea-Mekong Summit scheduled from the 25th to the 27th of November in Busan.
And from the 13th of November until the 19th, the president will be traveling to Latin America for an official visit to Mexico and to attend the APEC Summit meeting in Chile. The presidential office expects that trip will upgrade ties with Mexico to a strategic partnership and lead to discussions at the APEC Summit on trade and investment, as well as sustainable economic growth. President Moon has promised his government's backing for companies and developers working on artificial intelligence to make South Korea one of the best in the field. And he says the government will be ready with a plan within this year. Our Park Hee-jun has more.
President Moon Jae-in says the South Korean government will unveil a national strategy by the end of the year to help the country develop its artificial intelligence industry.
정부는 올해 안으로 완전히 새로운 인공지능에 대한 기본 구상을 바탕으로 인공지능 국가 전략을 제시할 것입니다.
This was during his keynote speech on Monday at the debut 2019 in Seoul. 1,200 business people, developers, and students attended the largest annual developers conference in Korea. To respond to the growing influence of the technology, the government has allocated $1.5 billion to data, 5G networks, and AI in the 2020 budget, a 50% increase on 2019. The president promised to help companies make bold investments and rapid profits through the soon-to-be-announced strategy so that Korea can become a leader in the field.
이게 지금은 이제 그 리모트 컨트롤러가 되는 거잖아요. 뭐 이렇게 사람 말에 따라서 움직인다거나 스스로 알아서 움직인다거나 이렇게.
그래서 5G 기술이 이곳에서 굉장히 중요하고요. 이 로봇과 5G 기술을 이용해서 클라우드에 들어가면 통일통전된 딱 그런 영화의 미국이 현실이 되고 있습니다.
But President Moon says it will not stop there. He highlighted that AI will be applied to various social issues, ranging from health and welfare in an aging society to the safety of women living alone and preventing crime. Artificial intelligence has been an actively discussed topic at the Blue House during President Moon's meetings with his top aides. It was also discussed during his sit-down in July with SoftBank CEO Masayoshi Son, also known as Son Jung-hee, who repeatedly stressed the importance of AI. The president's remarks at the conference make clear his determination to foster the AI industry to back the growth in non-memory semiconductors, biotech, and future cars, which he sees as Korea's three new growth engines. Park Hee-jun, Arirang News.
South Korea's ruling Democratic Party has vowed its utmost efforts to foster a fair society and an economy in which all can coexist. In a policy speech at the National Assembly on Monday, the party's floor leader, Lee In-young, highlighted the need to reform the prosecution and revamp the electoral system in order to achieve those goals. He said the prosecution's power needs reining in, and the electoral system needs to better reflect people's preferences. He also noted the need to reform Parliament in order to prevent boycotts and deadlocks caused by partisan wrangling. He added the National Assembly needs to step up legislative activity to support next year's expansionary budget in order to boost the economy. Time now for an in-depth look at the market news as we start the week. And for that, I'm joined on the line by Dr. Yang Jun-seok, professor of economics at the Catholic University of Korea. Dr. Yang, thanks for coming on today.
Happy to be here.
Well, last week there was news that China has set up a national semiconductor fund worth around $29 billion. The goal there to reduce China's dependence on U.S. technology. Tell us a little bit about that and what else stands out to you in the markets today.
Okay, well, it was established last Tuesday, and this was actually not the first time that China has set up such a semiconductor development fund. They had a similar fund in 2014 at a smaller scale. Now, the 2014 fund mainly was raised from government agencies and state-owned enterprises, and this current fund, the one that just started last week, also seemed to be have gathered its money from regional and local governments, as well as government-supported state agencies and state-owned enterprises, such as the Chinese tobacco monopoly and China Development Bank. Now, the reason that this is somewhat worrying to the watchers of U.S.-China relationship is that this is the exact kind of industrial policy, subsidy policies that United States was angry about on China. So it seems to confirm that China will continue to engage in these type of industrial policy subsidy programs, and that will obviously have some repercussions on the China trade war negotiations. On the other hand, because of the current trade war and because of the problems that they're having with direct investment, I think China is now more concerned than ever that it has to have a somewhat independent base from the United States. So that means they now actually have more incentive to double down on industrial policy as well as these type of subsidies into technological research and high-tech industries. So in a lot of ways, this is making the problem worse and not better, but you can see where China is coming from. But even with this type of industrial policy, China is still years behind the industrial leaders like Intel, TSMC, and Samsung. I don't think this will have much impact in near future. And other events that we see in the global economy, the stock market seems to be somewhat stable. There hasn't been a large news coming out about any economic changes, but I think the market is still nervous because, every sign points to a serious global recession.
Right, and we still haven't got confirmation of that supposed trade deal yet. But meanwhile, another story connected to China is Bitcoin in the past couple of days going back up by as much as 40%. It's around $9,600 US dollars right now. Why is that? And do you think this is a rally that'll last?
Okay, I don't think it'll be a rally that lasts. But the interesting thing is most analysts attribute this rapid increase in value of Bitcoin to what Xi Jinping said during official meeting that he had last week. He said China should take blockchain as an important breakthrough to achieve independence of core technology. So this, in a sense, is linked to that semiconductor development fund. And there has been a lot of discussion among the scientists, engineers, and politicians in China about how to use blockchain. But the interesting thing is China does not allow sales or trades of Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies. So while China may be gung-ho on blockchain technology as a technology which records transactions, it really doesn't affect cryptocurrencies directly. And the fact that the value rose by as much as high as 40% does show that the cryptocurrencies actually do have some problems. Cryptocurrency is special. It's special not only because it uses blockchain technology, but it basically doesn't have a central bank controlling the value of the cryptocurrencies. A lot of people believe that that's its advantage, but it's rapidly turning out to be a disadvantage because, when we have this situation like this, because of some piece of news, demand suddenly starts increasing, it tends to increase greatly because there is no central bank trying to keep a hold on the value. And then when the value starts to fall, then it'll fall greatly for the same reason. It doesn't have a central bank trying to maintain a stable value. So we're going to see continual really high volatility in the cryptocurrency. That may make it a very good tool for speculation, but it doesn't really allow to make a good currency that people can use. So I think this rapid rise in value just points out the problems with cryptocurrencies, especially Bitcoin.
Indeed. Well, this coming week, we'll see the start of full-scale deliberations in Parliament here in South Korea over the government's budget for next year. We'll see consumer inflation data this week, too, whether that's picking up from the 0% range we've been seeing. That and what else is coming up this week?
Okay, the most interesting statistic will be, as you mentioned, the consumer price index inflation. There's a lot of concern over whether it will be a negative growth for the third straight month. I think there's a good chance. A lot of analysts believe that the 12-month inflation will be negative as well because the high food prices that we saw last fall continued until October. So it'll be November or December when we start to see a positive trend in inflation again. Now, this is just the technical aspect of it because we had a very bad last summer, but still, I think it'll make people more worried about the possibility of deflation. And then some other numbers, interesting numbers which are coming up. On the 29th, we have the Business Sentiment Index. In August to September, between August and September, it rose from 70 to 73. It had a positive trend, which is good news, but the bad news is it's below 100, which is sort of the neutral level. So people believe it'll be a bad business environment for the near future. And then we have on the 31st, industrial trend for September, where we see trends in production, consumption, and investment. And we've been having a lot of mixed signals here as well. There's some signals seem to show a slight recovery. Some signals say that slowdown will go on. So we'll see if we can get some more clarity in the September numbers that are being announced on the 31st. And then the National Assembly budget review, they're reviewing the government's proposal for the 2020 supersized budget of 513.5 trillion won. The problem is we really need to see whether that budget, the money, the programs that are funded by this money is being used effectively, whether we're really getting enough bang for the buck. And hopefully the National Assembly, the subcommittee can get into details about how money is spent. But on the other hand, because of all the political posturing that we've been seeing lately, whether we can get some really serious analysis done, I'm a bit skeptical on that.
All right, Dr. Young. Well, we'll have to leave it there for today. Thanks so much for sharing your insights with us.
Thank you.
Now, since early this month, more than a dozen wild boars in South Korea have been confirmed to be infected with African swine fever. Quarantine officials have been hunting the boars, deploying armed soldiers to kill them and setting up traps. But with 2 new cases confirmed last week, officials have decided to take their response to the next level. Won Jung-hwan reports.
South Korea will set up fences from the east to the west of the country in a bid to stop wild boars spreading African swine fever in the south. Quarantine authorities decided Sunday to build these structures that will stretch from the western border city of Paju to Gosong on the east coast after wild boars infected with African swine fever were found near the border. The 200-kilometer-long fence will be constructed in 4 different regions, including Paju and Cheollon. The officials plan to first set up fences in 3 regions near the outbreak zones before mid-November, and then extending them to the eastern side as soon as the first phase is finished. From Monday, authorities will also expand the areas where the hunting of wild boars is permitted as part of broader measures to prevent the further spread of the disease. No additional African swine fever infections have been reported at local commercial pig farms since the 14th case was confirmed on October 9th. But the wild boar issue is keeping the authorities on their toes. The tighter measures were introduced in consideration of the breeding season for wild boars that's set to start from November. How the animal disease found its way into South Korea is still unclear, but there's speculation wild boars might have brought it in from North Korea, which reported its own outbreak in late May. African swine fever is not harmful to people, but it's fatal for pigs. Won Jung-hwan, Arirang News.
These days, a growing trend among South Korean consumers is to look for big discounts on high-quality goods that have been refurbished. On the lower end, retailers like convenience stores are offering more products under their own brand. Yoon Jung-min reports.
When new products are returned to shops due to reasons like minor defects, sellers repair and resell them to customers at much lower prices. Refurbished goods can be sold with up to 70% off the original price, and the goods can range from electronics to furniture and clothing. These products look new, but actually they are products returned with minor defects that have since been repaired. Sellers say they are just as good as new products at much lower prices. More and more people want quality goods at a more reasonable price, and those range from homemakers to single households, young people, and newly married couples.
I'm looking for a fridge to store kimchi because mine's broken. I'm comparing the prices with products at other shops. I prefer ones that are easy to use and that are cheaper.
The products are usually returned with minor defects or scratches. Some products are returned just because customers change their mind after purchase. The shop also gives discounts for products that have been on display at a store. But of course, there are things that consumers have to check before they buy products.
We recommend customers to check any defects, such as scratches, before buying goods. Most importantly, it would be wise for them to test the home appliances at the shop and check they operate well.
In the meantime, while some shops are going premium, others are targeting people who want less expensive products. A local convenience store brand released its own brand groceries this month, with ramyeon noodles for just 500 Korean won or about 40 cents. Other products such as a cup of coffee or a loaf of bread also cost around $1. With the refurbished market expected to grow $8.4 billion this year and $1 shops popping up across the country, more shops are expected to target those who seek more reasonable prices. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
And that brings us to the end of this newscast. Thank you for watching. More live news coming up at 7 p.m. Korea time.
The 2019 Overseas TV Audience Survey.